Right. Okay, good morning, everybody. At the back there, I think they're pages. Okay. So, today this is the last year on Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai. It means Hashem, next week we're going to start the next Torah revolutionary, who was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And that will take us into next year. The whole of next year will, at least, goodness knows how many shirim on Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. Okay, so we've spoken about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai before the Churban, during the Churban, and now after the Churban. What does he do after he sees everything has fallen to pieces? Okay, which he knew was going to happen because that's what he spoke about to Vespasian. But he realizes that we're in a massive crisis. And the crisis is so deep that the Jewish people didn't know what to do. Okay, we're talking about Lahavdil Elef Havdalot, which isn't Lahavdil Elef Havdalot, after the Shoah. What happens? And the feeling amongst the Jewish people is written in quite an unbelievable way in a Gemara in the end of the third parak of Masechet Bava Basra. And there the Gemara says the following. Line number 5. Tanu Rabanan, Kshecharav Habayit Bashniya, okay, after the Jews had gone through a second destruction, Rabu Prushim B'Yisrael, there were many people amongst Am Yisrael, Shelo le'echol basar v'lo lishtot yain, they weren't willing to eat meat, they weren't willing to drink wine. Now, just think to yourself, the staple diet those days was meat, and the staple drink was wine. That's what there was. They didn't have all the modern day foods which we have. Okay, every single day they used to shecht. Okay, every single day, every drink, there was no water to drink. They didn't drink water. Why didn't they drink water? Because all the water is contaminated. Okay, that's why all over the world, okay, people hardly drank fresh water. It didn't exist. They used water for irrigation, but they didn't use water for drinking like we do. And therefore, but they knew on the other hand, wine is intoxicating. So what do? You hardly have anything. So you don't eat meat, you don't drink wine. Nitpalem Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua ben Hanania, the second of the great Talmidim, pupils of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai, says to them, Amalem banai, mipnei ma atem ochlim basar ve'en atem shotim yain. Amrulo, they said to him, Lo nochal basar shemimenu makrin mal gabe mizbeach. How can we eat meat when that's what they used to offer up on the mizbeach? V'achshav batel, and now there's no korbanot. Nishte yain, we drink wine. Shemenaschim al gabe mizbeach v'achshav batel. Amalem, if that is the case, says Rabbi Yoshua, Im kein lechem lo nochal, we can't eat bread. Shekvar batlu menachot, there's no meal offerings. Efshar bepeirot, you can eat fruit. Peirot lo nochal, shekvar bitlu bikurim. Efshar bepeirot achirim, okay, you can eat other fruits. Can you eat other fruits? No. Maim lo nishte, don't drink water also. Shekvar batel nisuch hamayim. Shatku, they kept quiet. That was the feeling. The feeling was absolute destruction. Amar lahem, banai, my sons. Bo v'omar lachem. I'm going to tell you something. Shelo litabel kol ikar. That means to tell you to stop mourning. Iefshar. Shekvar nigzera gzeira. That was the decree. Ulitabel yoter midai. Iefshar. To mourn too much. Also we can't. She'en gozrim gzeira latzibur. Eleim kein rov hatzibur yicholim la'amod ba. You can't make a gzeira unless the majority of people can do it. So therefore we've got to find a happy medium. That was the feeling after the destruction of the temple. Let's carry on living. Rabbi Yeshua comes and says, yeah, you've got to carry on living. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu left us here, we've got to carry on living. That is the feeling of the Jewish people. Can we live? Can't we live? Can we survive? Can't we survive? Etc., etc., etc. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai realizes that the center, the focus of the Jewish people is actually Yerushalayim, the Beis HaMikdash. Now, there's no Beis HaMikdash. What is the future? What is the future of the Jewish people after the destruction of the temple? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai asked Vespasian for three things. One of them is Yavne, one of them is Rabban Gamliel. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai realizes that what was given over, and here we come to perhaps one of the most important points of the whole concept of the second Beis HaMikdash. What is the concept of the second Beis HaMikdash? Now, to give us an introduction, which is something quite amazing, and it's a pity that we didn't speak about this before Shavuos. Shavuos is not mentioned in the Torah in regarding to, and I'm sure people have spoken to you about this, about Zman Matan Torateinu. It's not brought anywhere. The first time we have any insight that Shavuos becomes a Chag because of Zman Matan Torateinu is when? Pardon? No, not post-Churban. Okay? When the Jews come back after the destruction of the first temple, beginning of Bais Sheni. Ezra Sofer enacts Kriyas HaTorah. What is the Kriyat HaTorah of Shavuos going to be? And here there's a huge machloket in the Tosefta. Some people say Parshat Re'eh, where it's written Shiva Shavuot. Others say, no, Matan Torah. The Parsha of Matan Torah. The Chodesh HaShlishi, what we write, what we read. In actual fact, in the Rambam, in Mishneh Torah, when the Rambam speaks about the laws of Kriyat HaTorah, and in the Rambam, there is no mention of Chag HaShavuot as Zman Matan Torah except in the Tefillah, which again was enacted by Ezra Sofer, is that the halacha is Parshat Re'eh. But the minhag, says the Rambam, became Matan Torah. That means to say that in actual fact, something begins to change in the world of Torah. What is the focus? Now, in the focus of Matan Torah, of Shavuos, the Chachomim decide that since it's approximately that time, B'chodesh HaShlishi Latzeit B'nei Yisrael, and anybody who looks in Sefer Melachim Aleph, you will see that what takes place on that period is also a rejuvenation, a renewal of Torah done by Melech Asa, also in the third month. Now, what do we learn in the first Mishnah of Pirkei Avot? Please let us jump to line number 30. Moshe kibel Torah miSinai, u'mesara liYoshua, u'Yoshua lizkenim, zkelim lanviim, u'nviim mesarua l'anshei Knesset HaGdolah. And Moshe Rabbeinu and the Levim give it over to Anshei Knesset HaGdolah. Who are the Anshei Knesset HaGdolah? Ezra, Nechemya, Zerubbabel, Mordechai, and the last one is, as we know, Shimon HaTzadik. Now, what do you think the focus of the second Beis HaMikdash should be? Hey, we built the Beis HaMikdash again. Korbanot, Avodat Hashem. Let's look what the Mishnah says. Hem amru shlosha dvarim. Hevu mitzunim badin. When you decide halacha, don't jump to paskin halachas. We'll read about it in a minute. Hamidu talmidim harbe. What does that mean? Make sure you have many pupils. And asus yag laTorah. The focus of Anshe Knesset Hagdolah is exactly that. They know the second Beis HaMikdash isn't the future of the Jewish people. It's not going to be the future of the Jewish people. Why not? Because in the book of Yecheskel, which speaks about the building of the Beis HaMikdash, there is a seeming contradiction between the Beis HaMikdash that is built by Nechemya and Ezra and the prophecy of Yecheskel. Okay, anybody who reads the last 10 chapters of Sefer Yecheskel, which they know about because Yecheskel, where did he prophesy? In Bavel. How is it they don't build the Beis HaMikdash like Yecheskel received the prophecy? And the answer is no, they can't. Because the prophecy of Yecheskel is at the end of the days. They only build a temporary Beis HaMikdash. Why do they build a temporary Beis HaMikdash? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't give them the Aron HaKodesh. The Aron HaKodesh is under Rabbi somewhere. They don't have the Urim V'Tumim. They don't have 5 kelim. The Gemara comes and tells us in Masechet Yoma in Daf Nun Bet Amud Bet. And they don't have these things. They don't have the Aron. Now, the Aron is the center, the focus of Torah Shebechsav. There's the Luchos and the Shivrei Luchos. It's all in there, and they don't have it. And what's instead of the Luchot? A stone called the Even HaShtiyah. That's what they do the Avodat Hashem on Yom Kippur. So therefore they know that what? That this is a temporary business, the second Beis HaMikdash. And therefore the focus of Avodat Hashem changes. And that's why the Anshe Knesset Hagdolah teach us 3 concepts. Now, we're going to learn a statement of one of the great Hasidic Rebbes, Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin, who was an unbelievable historian. Okay, line number 20. The Pri Tzadik on Chanukah. This is Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin wrote multiple Sforim. And here he speaks about a focus which we have, which creates a new way of looking at things. Ubinyan Beit Hasheni היה בו התחדשות תורה שבעל פה על ידי אנשי כנסת הגדולה ובימי מרדכי ליהודים הייתה אורה זו תורה ולא כתיב אור רק אורה לשון נקבה. It's not written or, but it's written אורה. Why אורה? Says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, female receives. Okay? And therefore, what is Torah Sheba'al Peh? It receives its power from Torah Shebechtav. Remez LeTorah Sheba'al Peh. Dimekabel miTorah Shebechtav. Shabbat Amru, Kfiyat Har Gegigit, they accepted it, etc., etc. Uveseder Olan, line number 23, Kshemetu Chagai Zechariah Malachi, who were the last 3 prophets, Paska Nevuah Misrael. There was no prophecy. That means what takes place in the beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash? Prophecy stops, wisdom begins. Prophecy is something which comes down from heaven. Wisdom, learning, knowledge stems from us. That is the difference between Torah Shebechtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Shebechtav comes down from heaven. Torah Sheba'al Peh is how we develop our ways of thinking. And therefore, Mikan ve'elech, end of line number 23, Hat oznecha, ושמה דברי חכמים. התחדשות תורה שבעל פה שהתחיל בבית שני. This begins, שזה קדושת הארון כמו שנאמר. Zechariah, Malachi, the last prophecy of Malachi is Zichru Torat Moshe Avdi. Siftei Kohen Yishmeru Dat. V'Torah Yivakshu Mipihu. What does that mean? Second Beis HaMikdash, what does it speak about? Development of Torah Sheba'al Peh. That is the focus of the Jewish people. Because in the 2,000 years of exile, the only thing which keeps the Jewish people is learning of Torah, knowledge of Hebrew, same calendar, same tefillah. Every single thing which Ezra Sofer does, that becomes the existence of the Jewish people. And in the second Beis HaMikdash, these concepts begin to develop. And therefore, what do the Anshe Knesset Agdolah do? They don't bother with what? With korbanot. They bother with these three things. Let's go over it again in the Mishnah. Hem amu shlosha dvarim. Hevu metunim badin. Now we're going to learn the explanation of the great Rosh Hashiva of Volozhin, the Netziv, Baal HaMek Davar, who wrote his Peru commentary on one of the famous works of the Gaonim. And he wrote an amazing introduction. V'chol zeh, all this takes place, Siba, La'agdil ha'pilpul v'achakira b'Yisrael. What takes place in the beginning of the second bayis is to develop intellect, develop thinking. What is going to be the focus, how we learn Torah shebichtav? Why do we look at it? Because remember, we don't have any books, we don't have Mishnah, we don't have Gemara, we don't have anything. What have they got? Torah shebichtav and the foundations of Torah sheba'al peh, which are handed over generation after generation. Uperush, hevu metunim badin, shelo teitzei hora'ah b'shikol hadat, ela la'atil sfeikot, ulahachriya, לחקור ולהעמיק עד שיבוא להכרעה ברורה. Don't just say what the halacha is. Think about it. Bring sources. One of the biggest problems nowadays is that you look on the internet, ChatGPT, and you get the answers. No, you miss the thought process. What is the thought process behind halacha? How do you develop it? How do you think? Fast foods, guys, is the worst punishment which we've got nowadays. Fast halacha is one of the worst problems because you jump over the thought process. And that is hevu metunim badin. Matun means slowly, slowly, as they say, shvoya, shvoya, lat, lat. Don't rush into things. Work it out. Process it. Okay? That's the first stage. And that's what takes place in Beit Sheni. The arguments of the Tanaim, the thought process. How to look at Torah shebichtav. The next thing is, v'gam al yedei dibuk talmidim. How do you go through this thought process? Throw out questions to your pupils. Let them think it out together with you. V'sheilotehem harbe Torah chokhmah yotzet kayadua umitalmidai yoter mikulam. A person learns from his pupils the most. Why? Because if you give them thought process, they can bring it out. Their brains are clean. They don't have all the rubbish of the old guys. Their brains are clean, neat. And think it out together. That's Hamidu Talmidim Harbe. And then finally, Od Hiziru, Lasot Siagim La Torah. Make sure you create these fences around Torah. Hainu Asmachtaot Gzeirot Rabanan. Validei Ze Mitrabe Hadat Vachakira Ma'u d'oraita u'ma d'Rabanan. What becomes d'oraisa and what becomes d'Rabbanon? Because by learning in the correct way, you become to analyze to yourself what is from the Torah and what is d'Rabbanan. Often, we get totally mixed up. And therefore, when somebody asks you a question, you first ask yourself, what is the framework we're working in? Is it kitniot on Pesach or is it chometz and matzah on Pesach? What is it? Isur d'oraisa, something which is asur from the Torah, or isur d'Rabbanan? Or is it a minhag, or is it a chumrah? And often we get mixed up between the chumrah and what's asur from the Torah. And we think to ourselves, the chumrah is from the Torah, and what the Torah is midrabanon, is a chumrah. No. Everything has to be clear. And that is what the Anshe Knesset Agdolah say. Work everything out. Create the thinking processes, how you're going to develop. And that's what takes place in the beginning of Beit Sheni. And that is what Yochanan ben Zakai is going to do. Yavne v'chachameh. Torah is going to be the guidelines. And what do the Chachamim say in line number 15? V'hainu the Amar Rabbi Chia bar Ami. Mishmei de'ula. Miyom shecharav, line number 15. Miyom shecharav habeit hamikdash. Ein lo l'HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamo ela arba amot. What's left in the world of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is us learning Torah. Many years ago, I bought a book, The History of the Jews by Paul Johnson. Anybody read it? I hope so. Because at the end of one of the chapters, he speaks about this statement of Chazal. He speaks about it. How the learning of the Torah has kept the Jewish people in existence. Since the Churban Beis HaMikdash, when the Jews were exiled from Israel, what created the connection of one people? And what was that? All keep one mitzvahs, same mitzvahs, all daven the same framework, Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv. They all learn the same Torah. They all learn the same Mishnayot. And they all had the same calendar. Think to yourself. They don't have a cell phone. They didn't have that. And yet the miracle was the Jews in Taiman and the Jews in north of France, Jews in Baghdad, Jews in Morocco, they all kept the same calendar. Okay? With all its problems. Think to yourselves, it's not like the Gregorian calendar which goes by the sun. It's not like the Muslims who go by the moon. Here you have to integrate the two together. And this integration of the calendar is the most complex issue. Anybody who learns the Rambam in Hilchot Kiddush HaChodesh will know the complexities of the calendar. Why sometimes you have 2 days Chodesh Mar Cheshvan, Chodesh Kislev, and sometimes 2 days Chodesh Tevet. Those are the only 2 months which change, and making sure Lo Adu Rosh and Lo Badu Pesach. And all this, there was only one recorded argument regarding the calendar, which took place in the time of Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon. What day will be Rosh Hashanah, etc., etc., and I'm not going into this, because it's an amazing, you want to know about it? We'll speak about it once. Okay? It's an amazing historical incident which took place in the time of Rabbeinu Saadia Gaon. But besides that, there was never an argument. And that's what takes place in the beginning of Anshe Knesset Agdolah. Right. Now Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai has to deal with 2 problems. What is going to be the future of the Jewish people after Churban Bayis? Now, let's think to ourselves, what was the focus of the Jewish people regarding the Beis HaMikdash? When do the Jews as a whole relate to the Beis HaMikdash, which is now missing? Now, what do you say?
On the regalim.
The regalim. Shlosha regalim. Okay? That's when everybody used to meet. Everybody used to go together. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai has this massive problem. What do I do now? And here Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai speaks to us about 10 takanot. Let's learn the first historical description of the Jewish people. It is a letter which is known as, and we mentioned it before, the letter of Rav Shrera Gaon. Rav Shrera Gaon was one of the last Gaonim. His son was the last one, Rav Hai Gaon. And Rav Shrera Gaon writes the development of Torah Shebaal Peh. And this is what he writes. And this is a translation from the Aramaic. He wrote it in Aramaic. V'achar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, shene'erag barugei Malchus. Anybody who remembers Eile Eskara, one of the Tanaim who was killed by the Romans was Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Haya Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai. V'hu haya bizman churban habayit. V'otziu, and they managed to take him out, el Aspasianus Caesar. Uvikesh mimenu mishpachat Rabbi Gamliel v'Yavne v'chachamea. Ukshenachu Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai v'Raboteinu b'Yavne. And when they eventually get to Yavne, hitkin lehem Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai 10 takanot, 10 new enactments. K'fi sheshaninu mishecharav beis hamikdosh hitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai. And these Mishnayot are mentioned in Masechet Rosh Hashanah and a few other places. And the following takes place. Okay? V'zu, says the Gemara in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, V'zu echad miteisha takanot, sheitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai makes 9 takanot regarding the Chachomim, regarding the Chagim. Okay, and we're not going to go into the Mishnah in Masechet Eduyot because that's something else. And he says the following in the Tosefta: Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai, Rabbi Shua ben Korcho, line number 55. Dvarim elu hitkinan Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai mishecharav beis hamikdosh lichsheyibane beis habayis bimheiro yachzuru dvarim elu. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai makes these takanot for the period where we don't have a Beis HaMikdosh. And the Beis HaMikdosh will be rebuilt, everything will go back. These are emergency takanot, emergency enactments. And the Rambam says the same thing also. Now, why? Why does he do this? And the Gemara comes along and says, because Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai wants to create for us Zecher LeMikdosh, remembering the Beis HaMikdosh. So remember what it was like. And therefore he makes all different takanot in order that we can relate to what took place during the Beis HaMikdosh. Now why is that? And it's brought in the Gemara in line number 65. Uminalan da'avdina zecher lemikdosh. Da'amar kra, and I've quoted you the pasuk. It's a pasuk in Sefer Yirmiyahu. Ki ale arucha lecha. I'm going to bring healing to you. Arucha means healing. Umi makotayich erpaechnu u'mashem. And of your wounds I will heal you, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ki Nidcha karu, nidacha karu lecha. They've called you outcasts. The Goyim have called you outcasts. This takes place in the destruction of the first temple. Sion hi doresh enla. Nobody cares about Eretz Yisrael. Nobody in the time of the destruction of the first base of Mikdosh cares about Eretz Yisrael. Ein doreshla, which means to say, what should really take place? What really should take place is doreshla. Somebody should seek it. Somebody should always look for the Beis Hamikdash. Now, to give us an insight into this concept, so is there air conditioning here? Can we turn it on somehow? Because it's just boiling here. I don't know, I'm feeling so hot, very hard.
Yeah, it's very hot.
It's very hot. Okay, you can see people are falling asleep. You need a bit of cold air. Right. Okay, let's start. The Rambam writes 14 books, Mishneh Torah. And what's quite fascinating about the Mishneh Torah of the Rambam is that every book he opens up with a posuk, a sentence from Sefer Tehillim. Okay, the Rambam was perhaps one of the greatest experts in Tanakh, just like Rashi. They knew Tanakh backwards, inside out. And the Rambam opens up his book. Oh. Baruch Hashem. Right. Right. And the Rambam writes his book called Sefer Avodah. Thanks, Harold. Really thanks. Sefer Avodah. And he calls the book, the pasuk, which speaks about Sefer Avodah, the following. Line number 75. Sha'alu shlom Yerushalayim. Yishlayu ohavayich. Seek peace for Yerushalayim. Sha'alu shlom Yerushalayim. And Yishlayu ohavayich, those who love you, will come up and connect up with you. The great Rav of Yerushalayim, Reb Tzvi Pesach Frank, the road in Beit Bagan, Rehov Harav Frank, he was the chief Rav of Yerushalayim for 40 years. Okay? Till 1962. He was the greatest Rav of Yerushalayim at the time. And he says the following. He wrote a book called Mikdash Melech, an amazing sefer. Pasuk ze. Sam lo harambam later tiferet berosh sifro hashmini chelek ha'avodah. This is the book where the Rambam opens up his book on Seder Avodah. V'nei avki pshuto, even though the simple explanation is Yazara litpalel tamid al binyan ir kodshenu, aval achar shehutzag lefanenu כמו חי, כמו שאר הלכות בית הבחירה, כי ייתכן כי פתיחה זאת רמז יש בה, ולהורות, and to teach us, שלא יעלה על דעתנו, כי רק במעשה הקורבנות שעליהם כבר נאמרו ונשנוע בדריש החז"ת, כי חובה עלינו לעסוק בהם, גם מעת הוסר התמיד וחרבה עירנו. There is a mitzvah to learn about Yerushalayim and the Beis Hamikdash. There was always a mitzvah, and the Rambam decides to put it in the Beis Hamikdash, in his book, because it's part of the Torah. Always the Rambam and the Chofetz Chaim, later on in our generation, there's a very famous story. The Chofetz Chaim wrote a book where he summarized all of the Sfarim which have been written on Sefer Vayikra. Chofetz Chaim believed that from the time of the Balfour Declaration, something is moving. And he writes a whole book on Torat HaKorbanot. Chofetz Chaim was the greatest person who saw the needs of the generation. He wrote a book called Nidchei Yisrael, the Jews who are going to go to America. He writes a book on people who have to go to the army in Russia. Okay? Shmiras HaLoshen, we've already spoken about that. Now, he writes a book on Korbanos. One of the greatest Rosh Hashivas who came to Eretz Yisrael, his name was Rabbi Zalman Meltzer. And he becomes the Rosh Yeshiva of Eitz Chaim. And during one of his visits back to Lithuania, he goes and meets the Chofetz Chaim. And Chofetz Chaim starts speaking to him, yeah, you live in Israel and this and the other. He says, tell me. He says, are you busy with what goes on in Eretz Yisrael, Beis HaMikdash, etc., etc.? He says, no, I'm busy with my yeshiva. So he says, the Chofetz Chaim said to him, you are living in Eretz Yisrael, and you're not writing about the halachas of the Beis HaMikdash? Chofetz Chaim gives Rabbi Zalman. Chofetz Chaim was 80. Rabbi Zalman was 50. He gives him Musa. And he says, you, the Baal Even HaEzer, you've got to start writing about the laws of the Beis HaMikdash. And Rabbi Zalman comes back to Eretz Yisrael, and he starts writing his Sforim on the Sefer Avodah of the Rambam. That was the Chofetz Chaim. And Ritzu Pesach follows it. And he says in line number 80, אבל לעסוק בלימוד הלכות בית הבחירה, to learn about the laws of the Beis HaMikdash ככל משפטו וחוקתו, לא מצינו מפורש, כי מצווה עלינו לעסוק בזה גם בחורבנה. לזה בא דוד המלך. This is what David HaMelech comes. לאחר שראה ברוח קודשו, שירושלים עתידה להיחרב. Yerushalayim might be destroyed one day. וימים רבים תעמוד בחורבנה, and there'll be many days where Yerushalayim will be destroyed. שוממה, desolate, וגלמודה, and lonely. ואין דורש, ואין מבקש בשלומה. עמד והזהיר ואמר, שאלו שלום ירושלים, רוצה לומר, עסקו בה, keep yourselves busy with learning about the laws of the Beis HaMikdash. Don't come and think that the minute the Beis HaMikdash is being destroyed, number 85, don't come and think that the fact that the Yerushalayim is being destroyed, don't relate to it. Think to yourselves, every single day we daven about it. So says David HaMelech, don't ever forget about it. And that also keeps the Jews in focus. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai does. He wants the Jews to remain focused, that even though you have seen the destruction of the temple, carry on in a way, some way that it exists still. Let's learn the first Mishnah. Mishnah, Barishona, Haya Lulav Nital Bamikdash, Shiva. Originally, the Arba Minim was only taken for 7 days in the Beis HaMikdash. Why? Usmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem Shivas Yomim. But what about outside the Beis HaMikdash? Ulekachtem lachem b'yom harishon. So therefore, in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, guys, Sukkot wasn't a day of Lulav and Esrog. It was only the first day. We only took Lulav and Esrog on the first day of Sukkot. Ulekachtem lachem b'yom harishon. Kapot Tmarim. Usmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem. Where's lifnei Hashem Elokeichem? The Beis HaMikdash. Now Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai says, after the destruction of the temple, what's our Sukkot going to be? How are we going to face Sukkot? What does Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai do? Mishcharav Beis HaMikdash. When the destruction of the temple took place, Hitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai makes a takana. Shielulav nital b'medina shiva. You will carry on taking Lulav and Esrog 7 days. Zeichel HaMikdash. Yeah. And what does it mean, Zeichel HaMikdash? It means you'll make a brocha on it. It's not a brocha levatala. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai recreates the environment of Sukkot which takes place in the Beis HaMikdash to every single one of us. Because as you said before, Harold, the focus of the Beis of the Regalim was what? Was Beis HaMikdash. Now the Beis HaMikdash is finished. What does Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai see? There'll be nothing left of Sukkot. No. You will carry on taking Lulav and Esrog 7 days outside Yerushalayim. Guys, that's a whole new change of focus. And why do you do it? Not because the Torah tells you, but because what? Zecher LeMikdash. Again, another one. Another halacha is V'shiyeh Yom Hanef Kulo Asur. What's Yom Hanef? Yom Hanef was the second day of Pesach. What took place on second day Pesach in the Beis HaMikdash? Omer. Now, there's an Isur Chodosh. You can't eat from the new produce until you have brought the korban. Correct? Now, what happens? You haven't got a Beis HaMikdash. What do we do now? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai says, remember what used to take place in the Beis HaMikdash on second day Pesach? Remember, don't start eating from the new produce until the third day of Pesach. Why? Remember what took place. If you come and say that already the second night, it's meaningless. Okay? Let's learn Rashi. V'shiyeh Yom Hanef Kulo Asur. Line number 100. Yom Hanafata Omer Kulo Asur le'echol min hachadash. Umidoraita, from the Torah, Mishe'ir HaMizrach Mutar. When the sun rises, you're already allowed to eat it. Kidamrina b'menachot. Katuv echad omer ad etzem hayom hazeh. Katuv echad omer ad aviachem. Hakeitzad. Bizman habayit, in the time of the bayis, the omer is matir. Bringing the omer, the waving of the omer. When there's no Beis HaMikdash, don't eat until this day has finished. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai creates for the Jewish people a new concept. Zecher LaMikdash. Now we're going to go to one more. Line number 120. Yom Tov Rishon Shel Rosh Hashanah Shechal Liot B'Shabbos. Okay? First day of Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbos. B'mikdash hayu tokim. In the Beis HaMikdash, they used to do tkiyas. Aval lo b'mdina. And not outside Yerushalayim. They didn't do tkiyas outside Yerushalayim. What does Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai do? What's he scared of? He's scared of that people will forget that what? Tkiyas shofar. Mishecharav Beis HaMikdash, Hitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai, Shiu Tokim B'chol Makom Sheyesh Bo Bet Din. Wherever you've got a Bezdin, and they will make sure that you're doing things correctly, you will be allowed to blow the shofar. Now remember, at that time, did they keep 2 days Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah? Didn't they keep 2 days Rosh Hashanah? We're not going into all the history of that. But basically, what does Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai think? He thinks to himself, if the first day of Rosh Hashanah is Shabbos, then everybody will forget about shofar. Now remember, guys, there's no WhatsApps. There are no newspapers. There are no printing notices all over Yerushalayim, what you're going to do and what not you're going to do. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai is petrified that things will fall to pieces. Anything which relates to the Beis, which took place in the Beis HaMikdash, and now we haven't got a Beis HaMikdash, what's going to happen? Finished. Judaism will fall to pieces. And therefore, he decides to create new mitzvahs. New mitzvahs. 7 days Lulav and Esrog is a new mitzvah. Okay? Zecher LaMikdash. Why? Because he bases it on the pasuk in Sefer Yirmiyahu. Doresh en la. The greatest, in line number 70, the greatest problem will be when nobody will look towards Yerushalayim. Nobody will daven for Yerushalayim. We don't have a country. Remember, exile is the worst thing for people. They forget their origins. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai decides that the biggest problem which the Jewish people will face, twofold: their origins and their laws. And therefore he creates, straight after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, two things: Yavne and your origins. You will always remember Eretz Yisrael and Yerushalayim. Let's go to the next one. Okay, line number 140 in the Rambam. ובזמן הזה שחרב המקדש, כל מקום שיש בית דין קבוע והוא שיהיה סמוך בארץ ישראל, תוקים בו בשבת. They used to do tkiyas on Shabbos. They used to. ואין תוקים בשבת אלא בבית דין שקידשו את החודש. אבל שאר בתי דין אין תוקים בהם אף בי שאין סמוכים. ואין תוקים אלא בפני בית דין. What took place, guys? What took place was that one of the greatest poskim of the Gemara, the Rif, in his place in Fez, they used to blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, which fell on Shabbos. Why? The Rif had his Bezdin. He was sure that nobody would carry it without the Eruv, because remember, what is the biggest problem? The biggest problem is, if you don't have an Eruv, you will carry the shofar. Are you allowed to carry the shofar to shul if you don't have an Eruv? No? No. It's on Shabbos. And that was the fear. And therefore, as long as you've got a Bezdin who will make sure that the shofar is going to be in the shul, there's no problem. The Rambam argues with it. But the whole concept was that first day Rosh Hashanah should not lose its identity. All around the Chagim. Because the focus of most of the Chagim, as we said before, was Regalim. Regalim and Shofar. And now we're going to go to the last one. The last one is the following. What happens on Rosh Hashanah? Now, what happens on Rosh Hashanah, guys, is the following. What is the biggest problem on Rosh Hashanah? Is it Rosh Chodesh or not? Is it Aleph Tishrei? How do we know it's going to be Aleph Tishrei? No? Eidim. Right? Witnesses. Pardon? And it had to come on that day, on Rosh Hashanah. Right? Let's ask another question. Were you allowed to be Mechalel Shabbos in order to come to the base to Yerushalayim and testify that the new month had come?
Yes.
Yes. Right. There was no problem. Right. But what happens on Rosh Hashanah? On Rosh Hashanah, there's an extra korban. Let's read the Mishnah. Line number 155. Mishnah. Barishona, hayu mekablim eidut hachodesh kol hayom. They used to accept the witnesses the whole of the day. Pam achat nishtau ha'edim milavo v'nitkalkalu halavim bashir. There was a big mess with the Shir Shel Yom. We're not going to go into all the details of this Mishnah, what exactly happened. And therefore they made a takana. Hitkinu. Shelo yu mekablim ela ada mincha. They only accepted the witnesses who came on Rosh Hashanah until Mincha. Because after Mincha, you've got a problem with the Korban and the Shir Shel Yom. What Shir Shel Yom are you going to say? You're going to ask me, what do I care about Shir Shel Yom? What do I worry about it? There was a worry.
Only a choice of 7.
Right, okay. What?
Only a choice of 7.
Choice of?
Shir Shel Yom, 7.
No, but there's a special Shir Shel Yom of Rosh Hashanah and of Rosh Chodesh. Right. Ve'im ba'u min ha'mincha u'lemala, no'agim oto ha'yom kodesh u'lemachar chodesh. And because of that, Rosh Hashanah was always 2 days. Always. If the witnesses came later, then what? Then what happened was that day was Kodesh and the next day was Kodesh. 2 days. Right. Hitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai. Mishecharav Beis HaMikdosh. Now the destruction of the temple. And they still had Kiddush HaChodesh al pi through seeing witnesses. Correct? There's no calendar yet. Only our calendar takes place of Hillel Hasheni, who was after Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi. At that time, there was no calendar. According to the Rambam anyway. Always witnesses. No Beis HaMikdosh, no problem of Korbanot. Correct? If there's no problem of Korbanot, what happens now? You can accept witnesses the whole day. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai, what did he do? Hitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai, Shiyu mekablim edut hachodesh kol hayom, the whole day. Because there's no mess. No mess. Guys, what does Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai do? And this is perhaps what we call about Torah revolutionaries. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai creates revolutions. Okay? What does Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai see? What is going to be the existence of the Jewish people in a new era, when you don't have anything? You've got to restart Judaism. You have to restart it. The same way as the Anshe Knesset Agdolah restart, and we spoke about our first revolutionary, who was Ezra Sofer, who after the destruction of the first temple and the Jewish people come back to Eretz Yisrael, he has to revitalize and change everything. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai, after the destruction of the temple, also has to do the same thing. What is the future of the Jewish people after the destruction of the second temple? And there won't be a third temple now until HaKadosh Baruch Hu decides, because there's no prophecy. Remember, Ezra Sofer knows that the first exile will only be 70 years. That he knows from Yirmiyahu. The prophecy, HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells them it's only going to be 70 years. So therefore you can prepare for it. After destruction of the second temple, guys, there's no prophecy. And if there's no prophecy, then what? The Galut can be until today. What?
Works for me.
Can you?
It works for me.
It works for you. Thanks.
Go back to work.
Okay? Therefore, guys, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai has to revitalize Yiddishkeit in a process which he knows the Jews can live with, even without the Beis HaMikdosh. And therefore he makes 10 takanot, 10 enactments, in order that the Chagim will be a Chag. Without Korban Pesach, without Shofar on Rosh Hashanah, without Arba Minim on Sukkot, what's going to be? And that is what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai succeeds, and everything which he does, he was accepted. Nobody argued with the takanot of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakai, because they realized that what? That this is going to be the future of the Jewish people. 80 years, 100 years later, comes along Rabbi Yehuda HaNossi. And he creates something new completely. And that, Emet Hashem, will begin next week.
So if he now accepting witnesses all day, the reason before why he said, okay, we'll have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, because we only accept the witnesses until Mitzvah, now we accept them all day,
Then why do we need Tuesday's Rosh Hashanah? Okay, if you want, we'll do the whole share on that.